You're listening to the Fezcast, the Saracens fans podcast bringing you the independent and unhinged views of the voices in our heads, as well as those of our special guests. To get in touch with us, find the Fezcast on social media and listen to us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube and more. Thanks for tuning in and enjoy this week's show.
You're listening to the Fezcast.
Hello everybody, I'd like to say happy Wednesday, but we're recording this Monday evening and we're still in a state of some sort of disbelief. I'm with Matt and Duncan this evening, and before I introduce you guys, I'm just going to throw up a juicy half volley long hop to Matt here so he can put one over Cal Corner. But we're going to record in the aftermath of what was basically Castres, wasn't it?
It's Castres.
It's like a disaster, but with Castres on it, Duncan.
Right, okay.
Slightly more family-friendly than Matt, but Matt, you've got a bit of a monologue, haven't you? This is where normally it would have been Jez rants, but Matt, go on. I'm handing you the loaded weapon. Fire your bazooka out there, mate.
I don't know where to start other than just saying, sorry, Duncan, get editing. It was an absolute disaster. You go back to, in fact, this time last year, playing against Bordeaux, we got absolutely hosed 50-odd points to 10. You can look at games like that and go, you're just beaten by a team that is miles better than you. You can look at losing to Bath recently by 1 million points and go, well, we had 3 injuries, a red card, yellow card, a lot of things against us. It's going to happen. But we've seen a few times now creeping into games like this one, like the Newcastle match, where, yes, we expect us to win, but we just don't turn up. There just seems to be, it almost felt worse than the Newcastle game for me, to be honest. Like the Newcastle game, it's a long-ish league season. You're going to be off it occasionally, but this is a European fixture. There's 4 group games. You've got the opportunity of home knockout rugby at the end of it. You've got to be up for those big games in the big tournaments. And it just it just didn't happen. The tackling was half-hearted. There was no creativity in attack. Tompkins and Lazowski were about as effective as the Swiss Navy in the centres. It was just insane. Ben Earl, I think, developed flippers for hands at one point and managed to drop the ball about 4 times in 5 minutes. We had 2 attacking threats in Theo Dan and Rotimi Shegan, who both got subbed off before anyone else. I don't really understand what was going on. And no one on the pitch seemed visibly frustrated by how the match was going. Mark McCall's come out and questioned the mentality of his own team in public, which he very, very rarely does. What was his word? He said he tried to communicate to the team that Castres weren't just a team of kids. I'm sorry, you shouldn't have to do that. They're professional rugby players. They play 20, 30 games in a season. If you're working full time, you might phone in a few days here and there, but the big days you've got, you turn up and you do it. At the weekend, they should be on it, regardless of who they're playing. I'm sorry, no one should be turning up expecting to play a team of kids and roll them over. And this is entitled as well, but whether you're paying for £1,000 season ticket or scrape it together to sit in cheap seats, we get that season ticket at a particular cost. For the last couple of years, it's been, if we get some knockout fixtures, that's included as well. So we're obviously all hoping for some knockout rugby at home. And we had a chance to get it, and they blew it massively.
I think it's worthwhile just reiterating exactly what Mark McCall said, because he didn't hold back, but he said it was a really poor performance by us. Castres already deserved to win the game, and we got what we deserved as well, which is a hard thing to say. Our mentality, for some reason, wasn't quite right, and that's on me and the coaches. It was a really disappointing day. Castres definitely out-infused us. They were really up for the game. We had plenty of the ball, but we were poor with it, and they defended against us comfortably. Then they struck when the opportunities arose for them. It was such a disappointing day. All 15 of the players they brought in had played in the last 5 weeks, just not together. It wasn't a pack of kids. They were proper rugby players, and we did try to communicate that to the team. We just weren't quite there mentally. I'm afraid to say, for me, Duncan, that's a cop-out, really. Because you don't bollock the players when they've had a bad performance. They should know. But there are occasions, the famous Alex Ferguson hairdryer. It had to come out. And did the hairdryer come out? Were the players told at half-time, this is not good enough, buck your ideas up? And I mean, the one thing that's been going around on social media and also amongst us is a certain person who made his come back from injury in Paris. He may not have been able to play at the levels, as Matt has pointed out on more than one occasion before, but certainly if you wanted someone just turning around and saying, lads, sort it out, Mr. Farrell certainly wouldn't have allowed that sort of performance to go along. And I don't think turning around and trying to make excuses or saying, our mentality wasn't right is quite the right message. I think we want to come out and say, we screwed up, big style.
Yeah, I've got to agree with everything Matt says, but I think it was right for Mark McCall to blame the coaches. And in particular with Owen Farrell, whether or not he'd be someone that we'd want in the team, what we do need and we don't have is an attack coach. And we've been saying the whole season, there's something wrong with the attack. Now, last season, do you remember that we would lose matches because our scrum was hopeless? And what we did was we brought in some new players this season and we actually got ourselves a scrum coach. We've got no attack coach. And every week, week after week, there's something not working about our attack.
Well, there's a couple of points there to make. Number one, this goes back to my constant complaint about coaching, is that if plan A works, all well and good. But if plan A isn't working, what do we do? Now, plan A is very much built this season, it appears, on getting forward dominance. Well, if your main ball carrier can't hold on to the ball for more than 2 steps, you're not going to get forward dominance, because all that's going to happen is you're going to have scrum after scrum after scrum after scrum, because you're dropping the ball, and that's going to take that way. And at that point, then you need somebody behind the scrum to do something different. A lot of the heat will come on the number 10 because he's that integral player, but I don't think he was getting good ball from inside him. And the ball he was given, nothing was done with it because everybody was taking the ball flat. There was no pace. And this is simple. This is something you drum into kids at the age of 5 years old. You run from deep, you have your hands ready for the ball to take the pass. And it just didn't happen, did it, Matt?
Not at all. Not at all, no. I mean, you mentioned the scrum, and actually, to be honest, that was one of the positives of the game.
It was.
I actually thought we had the measure of them in the scrum and were beating them at times. And that was with both sets of front rows too.
It's been sorted out, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely.
We've got to hope that the same happens with our attack, because we are static when we receive the ball, and the back play seems to comprise entirely of that pass behind. Newcastle did it, and I think Castres, I don't know whether they studied it, they were right up on us, and it ended up usually with Elliot Daly having to make a blinking great U-run to try and get round to Tobias Elliott, who was then crowded out himself.
Yeah. Jez is absolutely right. There was one plan in attack, because Castres' rush defence was fantastic. They played really, really well, defended really well. And the ball was just being shipped along the line because neither Tompkins nor Lazowski knew what they were doing with it. So just shipped it on to the next person. Daly's had to come into the line, and he's either given up and kicked it away with a grubber kick just to try and make something happen, or he's left his winger with 9 people to beat because they've just rushed out and drifted across.
That's right.
And that plan didn't work at all. So, yeah, no plan B whatsoever, Jez. You bang on. And
I think the other problem as well is, and we'll go back to the entitlement as well, the word in the build-up were we were as guilty of it as anything. We looked at the Castres team and thought, well, they're putting out a third string here. Doing a French thing, they couldn't give 2 tits about an away match, which I felt was daft before the game because, they could qualify by beating us with enough tries for a home knockout game, which they went out and did. And it's almost like they just pinned up the rugby newspapers, whatever they saw on social media, just pinned up the dressing room. The team talk was done. And there's an awful lot of players there who've gone, do you know what? I'm going to stick my hand in the air. I don't know whether there's a complacency come this week because it's the week that international squads have been announced, whether there's been a few players who've gone, maybe, I'm in the squad now. Well done, whether that's affected their mentality or whatever. Worse than poor, it's unprofessional, isn't it?
Well, Theo Dan didn't think that, did he? Like you said, him and Roti were the 2 players who didn't deserve to lose. But we were all guilty of that. I mean, I've got at the moment the most horrendous and just really debilitating attack of the man flu.
Oh, you warrior, Duncan, you warrior.
Well, yesterday my wife said to me, you cannot go down there and sit outside in the cold. And I said, I'm going down there because it's going to cheer me up. So that worked, didn't it? Quite clearly, they're organised like Leon, where they've got about a squad size of about 450, and they rotate all the time, because when they came out, there were some blinking monsters there.
Oh, enormous.
Their winger, and it showed in the line out as well, which the scrum went well for us. The line out was hopeless because there was a whole line of giants. The 21, when he came on, bloody hell, where did he come from?
Yeah.
They obviously had some really, really good players.
I think we've put to bed the criticism we had a couple of weeks ago of not being critical. When we need to be, we will be. But I think also we are only reiterating and mirroring a lot of the stuff that's been out on social media. And I have seen some people come back and say, oh, you're going to apologise for not being positive or whatever. No, I think people have paid an awful lot of money to watch this, whether they've shelled out for Premier Sports or they've gone to the game. They're entitled to be a bit pissed off with yesterday's performance. And I think people at the club need to know that people are pissed off because, Matt, as you say, if you lose to a better team, I'm not saying that Castres weren't a better team. They clearly were. But, the Bath game, whatever, you can, if you see effort, and I don't know where we saw the effort, but I mean...
Can I just say one thing? I want to be careful about throwing out the baby with the bathwater, because what I was thinking during the game, before it was time for the subs to come on, I was thinking, we've got no big forwards to come on. We've got no Nick Ezekiel, we've got no Theo McFarlane, we've got no Andy Christie.
Yeah.
And with the squad size, that's important. Nathan Mikaloff came on and he's really good, but he's still a kid. In terms of baby with the bathwater, I don't want to see that change too much.
Let's look at these 3-word reviews. I mean, Karen Wright, Rugger Hugger 70, big beats small.
Yeah.
If you get a good big guy, you will always be an exceptional small player. Rugby Saracens, unexpectedly poor defeat. Adam Mills 28, really, really poor. Nathan MG, game management problems. Rue Cayford, worryingly blunt attack. Jonathan Hale, backline went nowhere. Robert Lovelock, new attack coach. A attack coach, maybe. Grubber Rocky, where's the passion? Josh Miller, 1992, missing Owen's leadership, and that's something we'll come on to when we talk about Six Nations and some decisions around that, perhaps. Debbie Knight, our old friend Debs, Castres wanted it more. Grant Osborne, they were better. Pretty much 99% of the comments I've seen were very negative, and I think quite entitled to be negative.
I'm not going to go off on another rant, but it's just reflecting everything that we already think. And Duncan is right. We shouldn't just be sitting here pillaring absolutely everyone and saying we need to completely change the squad and turn things over. You look at the bench and go, we were a bit lighter than we wanted to be, but these guys need a bit of game time, and unfortunately, because of the injuries, they're getting it. The bench wasn't the problem. You look at the team that Castres put out on paper and go, we've got to look at that and go, okay, our bench is a bit weaker than we want it to be. We've got to get this game done in 60 minutes with the players that we've got and not have to put the pressure on the young players on the bench to come on and do it. But
I am reminded of what Joel Tompkins said, which he said, at the top level of rugby, if you think people aren't trying, you just don't know what you're talking about. So that's someone right in the heart of it. It looks like it. There's people demoralised, but I believe that, there's big changes on the coaching side with the organisation. Not sack them all, but they do need to look at what they're doing.
I'm not going to say that people weren't trying, but I certainly don't think that was 100% effort.
Yeah.
That's
The other issue there is that, and Smalley said it in the aftermath of the Bath game, these are once-in-a-while situations. It's always going to happen. Problem I've got is it's happened more often, more quickly this season. And there's been a few games as well where, Bristol in particular, where we allowed them back in to get that bonus point. Should never have happened. Yes, it's a group of young players gelling together and everything, but are they getting the leadership on the field and off the field to allow them to cope with those situations better? We always say it's Smalley we trust, but I hope someone did go into the training ground this morning and said, what on earth was that, gentlemen? Look at yourselves hard. Look at yourselves in the mirror. Look at the bloke sat next to you and say, did you give him everything you could have given him? And did you give those supporters out there everything you could have done? And I'm not sure there was a huge amount of humility in the build-up to the game from certain areas. And that's all across the club, not just the playing staff or the coaching staff, but all over, number one. And was there the discipline? Was there the teamwork? Was there the work rate? And I'd argue on that game, no, there wasn't.
No.
Yeah, I mean, what can you say?
I'm enjoying this, by the way, because Duncan's obviously jetting off for a little while, so we're making it as difficult as possible for him in the edit. Look, there will be a line in the sand drawn after that game, and we have had a few of these, but I think this is a real point where the coaching staff have to look at it and go, right, where do we go from this point? And actually, there's a very odd symmetry. They could probably listen to Alex Osterbury talk last week or the week before, whenever it was, and what he said following the women's loss to Loughborough.
Very interesting next week, isn't it? Following a performance like that.
Yeah.
When we lose all the England boys down to the absolute bare bones.
I know, I'll be totally honest, and I absolutely mean this. I would rather see us lose, but look like we're trying something different. We're trying to change the plan a little bit than win by scoring 4 maul tries and just getting over the line.
This is probably a moment to go back to basics, and without wishing to fall into the same trap as we've done build up to Castres, Exeter Chiefs aren't having the greatest of seasons. So this would be an ideal game in which to reset. And like you say, Matt, we shouldn't expect to go down to Sandy Park and win, but I think we should expect to go down to Sandy Park and see, one, a reaction. And we've talked about this before, where they don't look for reactions. Well, I think someone will be looking for reaction. But 2, there is no such thing as a wrong decision on a rugby field other than making no decision at all. And that no decision, we saw that in spades on the weekend. And if that means you lose a game narrowly but show some effort, then us as supporters aren't going to be as fussed as perhaps we would be where we see them just doing the same thing over and over again, expecting a different result.
Well, we have the announcement today about Phil Morrow. So there's clearly going to have to be a reorganisation of the coaching team. But that's for next season. You've said before they must know about this problem in attack. Well, they've really got to know about it now. And it reminds me of that, I can't remember which season it was, when we went into a dreadful run. We had that appalling performance against Leinster in Dublin. And there was a whole load of other stuff. It was a really, really awful run. And someone I met said that he works in a garage and Owen Farrell was filling up his car. And he said to him, "Owen, what's going wrong?" And Owen Farrell said, "We don't know."
Maybe Alex Good needs to take that step up into a coaching role, because we know that he is a visionary rugby player on the field and that he is giving up playing at the end of the season. Although if I was Amptill, I might be knocking on his door and saying, "Do you fancy being a player coach for a season to help him learn his trade?" Which I wouldn't think would be a bad idea for him, much the same way as Richard Barrington's doing there. Perhaps you need to bring him into it. You're right. I just think there's no focal point there. Is Smalley doing it? Is he looking after the attack side of things? Is this a bit like, where Eddie Jones with England, wasn't it? If that's the case, where Eddie Jones just didn't allow anybody else to do the attack coaching and made an absolute rickets of it himself. I don't know if that's the problem, but
I don't think that's his style, is it? He's more of a managerial type.
Yeah.
The problem is, I don't know that there is one solution. I'm not sure it is entirely just that we need an attack coach. Unfortunately, I am singling people out again, but unfortunately, I don't really know what's happened to Ivan Van Zyl this season. The distribution has been much slower than we used to with him, and his radar, to be honest, with his passing sometimes seems way off. And you can have all the attack ideas you like, but if the ball's not coming to you properly, then you're not going to be able to put those plans in action. Fergus Burke is blowing hot and cold as a 10. We've seen really good glimpses of just how amazing a player he could be, but it's not quite there consistently yet. At the end of the day, if your 9 and 10 isn't functioning properly, you can have all the attack coaches you want. You're never going to be able to put that together well. I'm not a coach. I don't know whether the problem is at 9, is at 10, is both, is the forwards, is the backs, but we do need to look at what's going on, try a few new things and rip it up and start again a little bit.
I mean, we're talking lots of grey clouds, and there is a little silver lining, which we'll come to in a minute, but the grey clouds also include a couple of injuries. Toby Knight comes back from suspension and gets a pretty serious-looking injury by the looks of things. And Jamie George in what can only be described as, what's the Latin for week? Because I was going to say annus mirabilis, but it's not quite a year of badness, but it's been a bad week for him. But he pulls up with a hamstring injury early doors. And was that coming from Jamie coming on and going, "Do you know what? We need to put some effort in. What do I need to keep on top of what Theo's doing, and Theo had a really good game, as you say, and he pulls up a hamstring. We really are down to the bare bones, aren't we?
Well, that's more of a problem for England now, isn't it? Because we were going to lose him till the back end of March anyway. In that respect, for us, it's good timing.
Yeah, with Toby Knight, though,
that was bad. That was so sad, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was. I mean, to be honest, I happened to be about as close as any other fan, and yeah, just hearing him, unfortunately, it's just one of those where you go, oh, this is, it could be a bit like the Andy Christie injury, where he's actually potentially not out for as long as we thought he might be. But yeah, it looked bad, it sounded bad, and I don't know that Toby Knight is ever going to be the first name on the team sheet in the back row, but he is developing into a very sort of Jackson Ray-esque player where you can rely on him.
Yeah.
Easy to say when he's just come back from a red card, but you do know with Toby Knight on that team sheet coming off the bench, you're at least going to keep the standard when he comes on. So I do feel for the guy. But you're right, bare bones, probably close to the bare bones in the back row, to be honest.
Well, my boots are still dubbed, Matt. So, I mean, if anybody needs an experienced Darley old number 8, then I can be available for a very small fee, obviously.
That ship has sailed, been set on fire and sunk by now.
It may be, but, I'm still willing, mate. I'm still, if the call comes, I will, I'll give it 100% effort. 100% useless as well. But, okay, let's look on the bright side. And the draws come out in the European Champions Cup. And we've got an away trip to Toulon, which is good news for Duncan and his air miles, obviously, because he'll be undoubtedly off down there to sunny France in April. But that's probably, Duncan, as good a draw as we could possibly hope in an away match. Because, Toulon, former giants of the European game, but not necessarily the top team anymore, are they?
Well, I think it's a very good draw in terms of having a nice weekend, but I actually have a huge amount of trepidation because that's how we played Sunday against the team that is 8th in the top 14. How are we going to play against the team that is 3rd in the top 14, actually having a very good season and snapping at Toulouse's heels?
That's the thing, isn't it?
Let alone the team that put 80 points. If we by some miracle managed to beat Toulon, we might have to face the team that put 80 points over Leicester.
I was just about to say, it's about, you get beyond that. You might as well just pack your bags and move to France. Because, if it all goes to form, you've got Toulon away, then Toulouse away, and then Bordeaux away.
Yes. And Bordeaux put 60 points on the Sharks.
Yeah. Best of luck.
A valiant loss against Toulon, I think, is the best result.
Let's turn it around then. Toulon in April. Is there any point?
Well, we've got to go.
We'll go out for a nice weekend away, but we're not going to put, as players, too much pressure on them because at the end of the day, what's more important is our league position. And with the injuries we've got and everything like that, do you prioritise?
April is a long way off and we can build up to it. And again, I do hate seeing teams turn up with a second and a third string and lose. Great to say when Castres did it and won. But given everything that we've said about how we played against Castres and how we played against Newcastle and how we played against Sale at the back end of last season and all these other games, if we go to Toulon and lose, fine. But I want to see us do it doing the team proud. So there's 100% there's a point because even if you lose that game and get knocked out, you can still use it to build forward in the league season. Go there and lose, we get a week off the next week anyway. So, there will be tired bodies, there will be injuries, but absolutely go out there and put it all in because I think they owe it to themselves, let alone owing it to us.
Well, you're absolutely right. I mean, just taking ourselves back to the beginning of December, we were talking about being out of all competitions by the end of the month, weren't we? You're right. By the time we get to April, we'll have had a load of league games, Harlequins, I think Gloucester and others. We may be in or out of contention in the league. Who knows? So it's a long way off.
It is indeed. Look, park it there, shall we? Because I think we're in danger of depressing too many people. We'll have a short break. And then we'll come back and have a quick look forward to Six Nations, given that we've got a few players going off on international duty.
You're listening to the Fezcast.
You are listening to the Fezcast, which is proudly sponsored by the Saracens Supporters Association. And I'm Alison Davis, one of the SSA committee. For a £10 annual subscription, the SSA provides our members with monthly newsletters, virtual and in-person player events, away match ticket allocations, and we organise pre-match gatherings at away matches. We sponsor men's and women's players, and we support the Saracens Foundation Track Club on behalf of our members. On top of all that, every year we have a seasonal SSA badge, which is exclusive to members. Where else can you get that much value for a tenner? Join now at membermojo.co.uk/SSA, or come and see us on match day in the Oasis at the Stonex.
This is the Fezcast.
Well, welcome back to the second part. I think we've all calmed down now. Matt, you okay?
Yeah, I could probably do another half an hour, but
Let's have a quick chat about the Six Nations. And first things first, obviously, drop me a line. I am doing the Six Nations prediction game again, so Matt can prove how little he does know about rugby in the prediction game. But Charlie will probably win again because he seems to be pretty good at that sort of thing. But yeah, for Motor Nero and that is, so we'll put some links out on the social media to that. It would be good to get people involved in that. But yeah, Six Nations squads have been announced. Before we talk about England squads, Welsh squad, Liam Williams, Nick Tompkins going, although probably Nick Tompkins hasn't. If he's going on the last game, if he's going on form, that probably won't have filled Warren Gatland full of joy, would it? But then again, Wales are very much looking at a wooden spoon you would have thought with Italy. Maybe. Liam Williams comes back, 3 games back in the Wales squad. Surprise, Duncan?
No, because they haven't got the largest player pool, have they? I believe that Wales have got some centres ahead of Nick Tompkins, so hopefully he's going to go there, have a bit of a different training scene and a bit of a holiday. It would be the best for us if he does.
Yeah, I agree with that one. Holding the tackle bags and throwing a few bottles around might be a good thing for him. The other big news, of course, before we talk about England is Fergus Burke. Despite Matt, you saying he has blown hot and cold this year, he's obviously impressed Gregor Townsend, who, let's be honest about it, knows a thing or two about fly half play, and he's been pulled into the Scotland squad.
well, yeah, I mean, Scotland are fairly similar to Wales in a way, and they've only got 2 professional domestic teams to choose from, and one of the fly halves in those is injured, and the other one isn't Scottish. So they are lacking in options. To be fair, Fergus Burke, I think there are similarities with the way that Finn Russell plays and the way that Finn Russell plays for Scotland. So I do think that he could do something there.
And potentially as well learn from Finn Russell, because, you know, that's what we want Fergus to do, is to learn and develop his game. Let's be honest about it. Finn Russell at the moment is the preeminent 10 in certainly the Northern Hemisphere, and I'd argue at the moment probably in the world at the moment. And I've been Finn Russell's biggest critic over the years because I think he drifts in and out of games. But as he's got older, he's definitely developed that side of him that I think would be good for Fergus to learn from.
Yeah, I think Finn Russell's got to be the leading contender for the Lions starting place, hasn't he? And unlike Nick Tompkins, who I really hope doesn't get a game, I hope that Fergus Burke gets on a bit now into the Six Nations, maybe at the tail end as a replacement or whatever, because I think it will do him a lot of good.
It's an interesting point, though, isn't it? Because you think about it, he's come over here, England could have picked him up, Scotland could have picked him up, and I think you're right, Matt, Scotland have got a slight paucity of talent beyond Finn Russell and Adam Hastings and who else they've got there. So it was probably, but you'd have think that Scotland are a stronger side than England at the moment, certainly on recent records.
Would have thought so, yeah. So I think it'd be good for him. And you're right, there's the players that get called up, you do have to look at and go, right, do we want them to play or not? I mean, you go back to the autumn and look at Alex Lozowski being called up for England. And I think that ruined his season, to be honest, because he was in great form beforehand and he's really not been the same after that. As you say, with Nick Tompkins, you kind of want him to just put his feet up a little bit and reset. So yeah, be nice for Fergus to see some action during the Six Nations and maybe even a different style of playing as well.
Well, with hindsight, did Alex Lozowski do the right thing holding out for an England place? I suggest he didn't, because Italy have had a great journey over the past 2 years and he could have been a part of it. And I think there's got to be an element of that with Fergus Burke's decision. He probably looks at the queue ahead of him in England and the other queue coming through and thinking, I've got more of a chance with Scotland because Finn Russell can't always be fit.
I agree with you. I think to get into the England squad, you'd have to take a baseball bat to George Ford's knees, and even then I don't think you'd still get picked ahead of him. Obviously now, though, we need to move on to England, and we'll talk about the players included. We've got 6 players in the squad, so it's obviously Elliot Daly as our one back, Ben Earl, Maritoji, Theodan, Jamie George, obviously injury has curtailed that. Obviously, the big one is that Steve Borthwick's seen what everybody else has seen and picked Tom Willis. Now, the interesting thing is, Matt, will he pick Tom Willis, A, to start at 8, or will he still go with Ben Earl at 8? And 2, if he does start Ben Earl at 8, does he pick Tom Willis ahead of Alex Donbrandt? And if he doesn't pick Tom Willis ahead of Alex Donbrandt, again, it's another player who would probably benefit from a bit of a rest. But that's incredulous to me because, I mean, Alex Donbrandt is a quarter of the player that Tom Willis is.
I wouldn't be surprised if Tom Willis is eased into the tournament, maybe starting on the bench. But, there's an argument that Ben Earl isn't in the greatest of form across this season. So, yeah, he could find himself being thrown straight in. So I don't really know, though, to be honest, because obviously England's fixtures are... It's a tricky start.
Yeah.
In Ireland, in France. I would expect, and I wouldn't have too much of an issue with Steve Borthwick kind of going with what he knows for those games, and the tinkering comes towards the end. But yeah, I'm not really sure how to take it, to be honest.
I disagree with that, to be perfectly honest with you. As we talked about in the first half about making decisions and everything, it's as much coaching decisions and having the gumption and the desire and the ability and the wherefore to actually say, right, yeah, let's just go with it. And I think Tom Willis has had a fantastic season. He can make a huge impact. And I think, when you got someone, a proper world-class number 8 like Lawrence Dallaglio, for all that Lawrence Dallaglio's faults, he really pumped Tom Willis. And a lot of that does come down to the fact that Tom Willis was at Wasps, obviously. So, I mean, I think if he'd been anywhere else than Wasps, perhaps that Lowell wouldn't have been so effusive with his praise. But Dallaglio did pick up on it and talks about what Tom Willis brings to the team. Now, I don't think any other 8 in the country, unless you brought a 22-year-old Billy Vunipola back, gives that England squad.
We were raving about Tom Willis up until the performance against Northampton, when he's just outstanding. He's been very good against Munster and he was good against Castres, but when he comes up against big European teams, that's a good game, but it's not like the game he had at Northampton. So it's going to be interesting to see how he goes for England. He's going to be very good, I'm absolutely sure of that. I don't think he's going to be as spectacular as he is against Premiership teams.
I think what you've got to remember, as much as anything else, is that it is a team game. You can look outstanding or the best player, but not necessarily have the best game because of what's going on around you. And as I say, if your open side's dropping the ball every 20 seconds and, you've got players come on and got injured or whatever, and we're losing line-out ball, no matter how good you are, you're not going to shine as well as if you're on the forward foot. And I think that's probably what happened on the weekend. Me, personally, I'll throw him straight in. I mean, I don't think the French would ever turn around and when Anton Dupont, for instance, came on the scene and said, we need to ease him in. They looked at him and went, this boy's a talent. We need to use him. And they used him pretty quick. And I think Andy Farrell does the same with Ireland. If he sees a player come in, he did it with Van der Fleer, didn't he? He turned around and saw a young lad and said, right, off you go, mate. Go for it. Wales have done it as well to a certain extent, perhaps with less success. But Jack Morgan, 22 years old, he's obviously a special talent. He was thrown in. And he did it with George North when George North was 19. There was no easing in. It was a case of if you're good enough, you're old enough, you're ready. Off you go, sunshine. Go and show what you can do.
Yeah. Fair enough. I'm not going to argue. I'm going to be nice now.
The big issue, obviously, though, is Steve Borthwick and his ability to communicate, because it seems that he's made an absolute bell end of a job of changing the captaincy. Now, there's so many different facets to this. Firstly, if Maro Itoje was going to be his long-term captain, which it seems is the plan, Maro Itoje should have been captain immediately after the last World Cup, because then he would be 30 games in or 25 games in, looking at 35 games perhaps as England's skipper and potentially British Lions skipper going into the next World Cup. Mistake number 2 is Jamie George, this end of his career, yeah, he's probably not guaranteed his place. So fair enough that perhaps he isn't going to be your captain, but it wouldn't have taken too much of a crystal ball stare to have worked that out 2 years ago, would it? And the third thing is, communicate it to him before any... I mean, if Mark McCall's to be believed, Jamie George didn't know until the evening before the announcement was made, which is ridiculous, Duncan.
Yeah, it would be really wrong. He's not so strong on communication, is he? The Six Nations series on Netflix starts soon, and last year's was absolutely brilliant. Exactly the sort of thing that rugby union needs. It's very made by the same people who make Drive to Survive Formula One. It's really, really good. And apparently Steve Borthwick didn't want to take part in it. which shows, where it's coming from. Oh, I've got this other job to do. I think it's not one of his strengths.
You can go too far the other way and be Eddie Jones and Warren Gatland, throw it in the barbs here, there and ever. I don't want to see that, but I want to know what the coach is thinking, what his rationale are. And I mean, it's something Mark McCall's got better at over the years, but also, what they do is they bring in people like Rob Webber's been great. And I chatted to Rob, but he brings out on the television. Dan Vickers is the same. You've got communicators within the team. I mean, Steve Borthwick's not a great communicator in that way. I don't think Wiggy is particular either. I mean, they're very dour northern type chaps, aren't they? That just, I don't know, if they don't inspire me, I wonder, do they inspire the players in the same way, Matt?
Yeah, I'm not entirely sure myself, but then I'm a little bit concerned, to be honest, about the selection of Marrow as captain. James is basically my ghostwriter here because he sent me a nice big long message, and I'm just agreeing with him. But I think we've seen this season. We know Marrow is a leader, but he's a leader sort of in terms of the aura he has, the wisdom he has. I don't know that he's an on-pitch referee management, light a fire under the players' backsides captain. If you're sitting in the changing room at half time and you're scratching your head trying to think of something to say, I think you turn to Marrow. But I'm just not 100% sure about, in the heat of battle, whether he is the right person at all. And I think he almost matches the style of Steve Borthwick and Richard Wigglesworth, where it is a bit calm, considered, quiet. I'm sticking my neck out, but yeah, I'm not sure about it.
I see Marrow as a captain who leads by example and action as opposed to words. Very rarely do you get a captain who can do both. Martin Johnson was one. Those type of people are once in a generation. But it doesn't mean that if you are just one type, you can't be a great captain, or the other type, you can't be a great captain. I'm not so concerned by Marrow Tozer. What I will say is, that's fair enough to have some criticisms and some concern, not criticism. I don't think you were criticising, Matt.
No.
Having some concerns about how he does things. What I've hated seeing this week since the announcement's been made is the absolute vitriol that's poured out. Because, I mean, I'll say it. I think for some people, there's an element of racism. There's an element of Saracens, and they hate Saracens. And the amount of times I've seen, 3 Saracens on a trot get a bit boring. Well, I think they're the best people for the job. I mean, who else are you going to have captain in the team? Who else is nailed onto the side who can be captain? Marcus Smith?
No. We'll slightly qualify that, how Marrow goes about his game and how he goes about, clearly, his personality within the squad, I absolutely love it. But I think he's better being able to do that without also having to lead everyone else around him and manage referees, because referee management is a massive part of the game. I would just be letting Marrow do what Marrow does best. I don't think you have your best player as captain most of the time, to be honest. Whether there are more options within that England squad, you're right. There aren't many. I'm a little bit surprised that someone like Tom Curry hasn't been brought into the equation at all, having been a club captain and still being one of the better players in that team and playing in the right position to be a captain as well. But yeah, there isn't an out-and-out obvious choice. I think we would get, and we have always got the best out of Marrow, just letting him be good without having to worry about being a captain.
So if you bring Tom Willis in, does it mean that you definitely put Tom Curry ahead of Ben Earl? Because he's the captain.
At current form, I think you do. Yeah.
If you look at that England team, particularly in the forwards, you've lost Joe Marley, you lost Dan Cole, you've now lost Jamie George through injury. There's quite a lot of experience and, dare I say it, gobby players who have stepped back from international level. So maybe it'll work having a quieter, more considered discussion with referees in the way that Marrow would do so around the players there. You could have Luke Cowan-Dickey obviously coming back in, who could probably gob off for England as well. But I think you get what I'm saying.
Yeah.
The interesting thing is, who do you pick in that squad? And you say you're going to go Tom Curry ahead of Ben Earl, toss a coin between the two of them potentially, but you're probably right. Tom Curry, the only thing that Ben Earl does give you is that greater versatility across the back row.
It's one of the positions that's usually subbed, isn't it? A bit like hooker, which is perhaps what counted against Jamie George as well.
Yeah, one or the other is a perfect bench man.
Yeah.
Ben Earl, Tom Willis, Tom Curry, you could pick all of them. He'll probably end up picking Don Brandt, but, you know.
The interesting thing is if he goes completely left field and a slight problem position has been blindside. Personally, I'd like to see Ted Hill being given a chance at blindside from Bath. I think he's had a fantastic season and looks really good. Cunningham South, Quins has done nothing wrong in his performances for England so far. But the left field would be to go Tom Willis at blindside, Ben Earl at 8 and Tom Curry at 7.
I would just like to pick a 6 at 6.
Yeah.
To be honest. So, yeah.
I agree with you, Matt, but I'm just trying to get myself in the head of Steve Borthwick, and that is a potential out to be able to keep Ben Earl and Tom Curry on the field at the same time.
Oh, definitely.
And then have your Alex Stonbrand on the bench to cover.
Bring the drinks on.
Yeah. As I say, my boots are dubbed. I fancy myself ahead of Alex Stonbrand, but there you go.
You look back 5, 6, 7 years and you think, oh my God, we haven't even got a back row sometimes, but we've suddenly turned it into an area that does on paper look very strong and is actually finding out the best combination of 3+1 that actually gels together and works well. So yeah, maybe the whole Ben Earl playing at 8, Tom Willis playing at 6 and Maro Itoje playing at 7 because everyone's got to play out of position because it's fashionable. Yeah. We need to stop that.
Oh, I'll play scrum half then.
Ben Earl at 12, isn't it?
Yeah, and clearly I'm the coach.
Yeah, so there we go. Well, sorry. Well, if it all goes to that this time round, Matt, we know where to go. RFU, please send your letters to Mr.
I'll take the money.
Bartlett.
In fact, knock a 0 off of Sweeney's wage, and I'll take that. But that's a completely different story.
Indeed, it is. Look, gentlemen, I think we've probably done that enough to death. And Duncan, you've got a bit of editing to edit out Matt's potty mouth tirades from earlier on in this show. Honestly, you go and wash your mouth out with soap, Mr. Bartlett. Terrible, terrible language. Honestly,
I'm hungry. That's what it is.
Well, thank you very much for listening. Don't forget, if you want to have a go at my Six Nations game, drop us a line and we can get you entered into that. Other than that, though, gentlemen, thank you very much for your time. And yeah, hopefully we've put to bed the criticisms that we're not critical enough of the squad when they deserve it.
It'll all be roses next week.
Well, it'd be nice, wouldn't it?
Absolutely. Well, yeah, I think we're going to put Barry in the hot seat because he's actually going down to Chiefs, isn't he? So we'll let our roving reporter take that one on. But yeah, thank you, gentlemen, for your time. And thank you, everybody, for listening in. And we'll be back next week with another edition of the Fezcast.
This is the Fezcast.